So how strong of a tactic is spawn rushing really? Well, today we're going to look at a game where my opponent, I think, tried to spawn rush me. I don't know. I don't remember exactly the context of what he was trying to accomplish, but certainly that's what it looks like. I'm going to be playing as Tzeentch. He's coming in as Ogres. Spawn rushing definitely depends on who you're playing as. Obviously, you need the mobility and the hitting power to be able to get to your opponent's spawn and also trade efficiently in terms of army damage value. What I mean by that is to get more damage on your opponent than you receive on your army, right? You want to win the battle, so to speak. Now, that is the most important thing, and you guys will hear me talk about that in all my domination videos. Focus on trading cost effectively above all else. Spawn rushing, kind of a secondary in my opinion, but what happens then if your opponent trades evenly with you while you're trying to spawn rush? Today, I'm playing as Tzeentch. Like I said, I've got a Herald of Metal up on the disc. We've got Soul Grinder, Doom Knight, Forsaken, and 3 Blue Horrors as my starting army. 2 Spawn of Tzeentch, 2 Flamers, 2 more Forsaken, 4 Pink Horrors, 3 Screamers, and a Blue Horror for my opponent's Ogre Kingdoms. He's got a Tyrant. The armor of the Tyrant does make him harder to snipe than some of the other Ogre Lords, and to heal him, he's got a Butcher as well, 2 units of Mournfang Cav, and 4 units of Saber Tusk Pack. So very mobile. They're going to try and immediately rush forward and get onto my missile units, I would imagine. Stonehorn, 2 Gorgers, and Hunter also in reserve. We've got a Scrap Launcher as well. 4 Iron Fists, pretty decent against Tzeentch to have the missile block chance. I like that quite a bit. Bulls and 4 Noblar Trappers as well. We're on the Galleon's Cove map, so finally we get a break from Mountains of Morn. And this is a pretty interesting one. This is one map where I think spawn rushing you may see more often than on other maps because the spawns are, there's really kind of 2 chokes leading out of each player's spawn, with the vanguard points being slightly forward of them, but primarily you have sort of these 2 chokes here. One on the left and on my deployment, on the right of his deployment, sort of controls access to these 2 objectives here, so you will see people pretty often rush into this gap right here because you have this sort of cliff making this gap even narrower than it would be otherwise. You can sort of bottle someone up in this point right here. It's a little bit harder on this wider open space on the side here, leading to the lower objective number 3. But let's see, my opponent rushing down here with some Saber Tusk Pack. He's going to try and sweep them up to occupy this space. And the Tyrant and the 2 Mournfangs are going to rush up and try and occupy this space. So I do have a decent amount of mobility. Herald obviously very quick. His magic shooting attacks here, magic flaming damage, do a pretty good amount of non-AP damage, but not the most AP in the world, which is why the Tyrant is pretty decent. Tyrant also gets self-healing from the snacks if he's in melee, which has to be the best named ability in the entire game. Meanwhile, over here, I've got some Doom Knights flying in. I developed some Blue Horrors into the forest here, or perhaps they were deployed there before, but my opponent's going to come over, sort of sensing that I have something here, try and get in on those forests, and this is what I'm talking about in terms of spawn rushing. He's taken some fire on those Mournfang Cavalry initially. We're going to countercharge in with the Tzeentch Forsaken. They definitely get hit very hard, but that's why you've got Barrier. They can absorb that impact better than other Forsaken. We're going to throw a big old Overcast Final Transmutation in this blob of cavalry as well. We're going to do a ton of damage to the Mournfangs especially, but the Tyrant and the Butcher are able to get out of that. And actually, it looks like mostly the Mournfangs were as well, so maybe not Overcast, maybe just a single Undercast, if you will. But going to bring in some Screamers as well. Try and push back some of these Saber Tusk Pack that are, again, trying to get all up in my deployment business. That being said, I have no idea where the Herald is going, having some pathing issue evidently, but Soul Grinder, all these units, just kind of not able to really do much right now. We did manage to push back some of the Mournfang Cavalry, but these Ogre characters are going to be surprisingly tanky. Definitely need my Lord to come over here and get some more shots on them to try and snipe them out. The Doom Knights are also here fighting, just trying to hold back this giant tide of Ogre bodies. Let's see what my opponent's bringing in now. In terms of reinforcements, he's got some Gorgers, probably trying to come get on this low ground objective. Screamers trading pretty efficiently. They're not the best against lighter armor targets, but as long as you don't take a countercharge from Saber Tusk packs, they should do just fine. That being said, my one poor blue whore, they're getting absolutely eaten alive by big, angry primordial beasts. Got some flamers out of my deployment, though. This is the one thing, fighting at your opponent's spawn, and from the Ogre's perspective here, right? I can bring in my units pretty quickly, and they can immediately join this fight and start helping, whereas he has to run the entire length of the battlefield in order to get any reinforcements here. Like, you can see those Gorgers are almost here, but it's taken them a significant amount of time, and even still, I'm able to probably get in and interrupt them with those Screamers. So, although the Tyrant and his Butcher are kind of just hanging around here still, now that I've got a little bit of space to work with, I'm actually going to get these spawn and just run them past and try and break through the blockade to get onto some objectives, because currently, although I am trading pretty well in terms of army value, unfortunately we don't see the little nice tooltip here that I would love to have on replays. But anyway, he is out capturing me, right? He hasn't actually captured any objectives yet, but he's got some saber tusks on this low ground here. The Gorgers had been capturing there in the center. He's got some Iron Fists coming in that can help cap as well. So it's a situation where I need to get some units with decent capture strength through the blockade, and so the Soul Grinder is going to sit here, just kind of occupy these two single entities for the time being. Spawn of Tzeentch can just run past and try and get up on the hilltop there. Flamers also trying to get a bead. The Gorgers are very strong, but here, just getting outnumbered by Screamers and worn down by Blue Horror is going to be a very good situation. Oh, here comes the Flames. Oof. Pretty decent volley there on that Tyrant. Bringing in some Pink Horrors as well to try and shoot him up. But the rest in the center, Doom Knights holding back a huge tide of Ogres. They can only hold for so long, though, and you saw there the charge of those Mournfangs connected on a couple of models and just outright killed them. So Doom Knights getting flipped off their discs like a big old coin flip. And yeah, still not being able to capture any objectives is pretty painful for me. My opponent did notice his other two Saber Tusks as well. They're sweeping up directly through my spawn to come flank around, threaten these Flamers, and maybe come rear charge these Screamers. Right now, the Screamers plus the Soul Grinder are finally able to mostly defeat the Ogre characters here. We'll see. Certainly might be able to rout them off, but the three-eyed Soul Grinder there just kind of chilling for the time being. Little bombardment there, maybe did a little bit of friendly fire, but the Hunter also kind of hanging around. I don't really want him joining up in this single entity blob, so we're going to try and take him out also. Spawn finally did get through and are relatively quickly capturing that objective number 1, so that's great for me. But we've also got some Pink Horrors, Blue Horrors moving down to objective number 3, since my opponent didn't actually fully cap it there. Another final transmutation as well, right in the center. Warp Flame also sundering their armor and dealing extra weakness to fire. But the Hunter does get in and actually occupy the Flamers momentarily. So nice back and forth here. I don't know. I don't really have enough infantry capture weight to actually start capturing here, especially with the Novelar Trappers hanging around. They've broken through the barrier of my Herald, so I need to maneuver away from that. Thankfully, the Herald, the only threat to the Herald in this matchup is any kind of ranged units, which the Ogres do have some pretty strong ranged units, but my opponent chose not to tech into that. In this particular game, it can be very good here. Obviously, the Iron Blaster is ridiculously OP, so thank you to my opponent for kindly not bringing an Iron Blaster. But there you go. Saber Tusk's still fighting here, so again, my opponent's basically had his characters and units fighting almost directly in my spawn. Not quite fully in my spawn, but still bottling off like a major avenue for me, and I've still been able to squeak units through kind of tactically, get some units down here onto the lower ground as well through this open gap. So we're now ahead on objectives, still behind on tickets technically, but I'm in a position to start pushing back, and we've been trading pretty evenly, maybe slightly ahead, but mostly evenly in terms of damage, which is really nice for me. Kind of pushing back this forward push, but it's pushing back, and the Gorgers are coming through with the Iron Fist to continue to try and bottle me up right in my deployment. So let's see how I can respond here. Man, look at those pink flames just flying all over, full-on disco effect. The Screamers, unfortunately, do quite a bit of damage in this matchup, but of course, flying units don't have any capture weight, so they cannot help cap these objectives at all. Spawn just chilling up on the top, defending for the time being. And down on the bottom here, the Gorgers moving in again, though. Gorgers' lack of armor, lack of missile resistance, means that they will take quite a bit of damage from this low-tier shooting. Although Gorgers are strong, very, very strong. Tzeentch is maybe the one faction, Tzeentch and Kislev probably, just due to the fact that you can take a high volume of low-tier shooting that's also like hybrid melee. You can trade pretty decently into Gorgers. Here comes the Spawn too. Spawn will also trade well into Gorgers. They get rid of the little armor that the Gorgers do have, and not to mention just 130 weapon strength overall, can punch back pretty hard against that low armor. So pretty decent stuff there. Herald also flying around, used up all of his ammunition at this point. Can still sling some spells, coming back around for another final transmutation, it looks like, as the Flamers shoot in here. Or, no, something else. Yeah, it's actually Toothcracker. Interesting. Give a little bit of missile resistance to these Ogre units. Will help a little bit against those Flamers, I guess, but missile resistance is only going to go so far in a situation like this. And here comes the final transmutation to try and finish off this Ogre blob. Look at that Butcher, though. Man, the Butcher and the Tyrant still just completely resolute at this point, just refusing to go down. Quite impressive. Spawn's charging downhill into some Noblar Trappers. Oh yeah, those Noblars definitely going for quite the ride there. Almost directly into the flames, and yeah, it does appear that they flew far enough to just directly die. So, fun fact, if units fly or fall far enough, they will just immediately get killed, regardless of how much HP they have. Interesting mechanic. It's why, like, you should never try and fight plague drones on the walls, for example, because your infantry will just get scattered off the walls and all die from falling. But anyway, the huge blob of horrors and Spawn also on this low ground objective continuing to hold, so we take kind of a tactical overview here. Even though my opponent still got his Lord almost in my spawn here, we're still bringing out plenty of infantry, able to secure these other two objectives. He's got these two Noblar Trappers sitting here, and finally the Butcher kind of pulls back as well. So, looking all right for me, but Spawn need to stay on the objective at this point as much as possible. They do get hit by the traps. No, it sounded like the traps actually went off there, but it looks like they did not. These trappers had been routed away, but now being cleaned up by the Herald. The Herald does have 375 weapon strength, so not the worst weapon strength for a caster. 35 attack and defense, though, are really not great with only 20 armor, so you got to be careful using them in melee, but I'm not too worried about some dang Noblar trappers. They're just some Noblars after all. I mean, definitely famous last words, but Tyrant still just sitting in the woods right here. Even though he does get debuffed fighting in the woods, it's probably smart for him to do that so that he doesn't get shot up by units coming out of my deployment zone. But, oh man, the Flamers. A little bit of overkill into some Noblar Trappers, but there you go. Butcher also healing himself back up. The issue that the Ogre Kingdoms are going to have, though, is because I've been trading evenly, they actually don't have enough forces to come and try and push me off of the objectives. Like, he would need to concentrate all of his units onto one objective to try and push me off. Probably objective number 1. I don't know, maybe number 2. We've got Mournfangs coming back down here, engaging the Spawn. These Saber-Tusk Pack, looks like they just finished off a unit there. The Hunter came back, too, and is fighting now on this lower objective, so Ogres have actually got a pretty good push going down here. At this point, though, I'm just about far enough ahead, not quite, but pretty close to where I only need to defend one objective. So as long as we can just delay him from taking any of these objectives long enough, and also threaten here in the center, keep in mind, kind of counter pushing back against the Spawn rush. Finally, Spawn, you know what I mean, not Spawn rush, but anyway. Yeah, the Forsaken coming in here, trying to clean up those Noblars, Blue Horrors out-capping the Butcher pretty easily, so there's that. A couple of vengeful shots from the Flamers there before they go down, which they definitely will. The Tyrant also getting lit up by some blue fire there. Meanwhile, over here, bringing some more Screamers. Again, the Screamers are really just here to route units and try and at least save, like, the one Pink Horror to maintain capture power here, and although my opponent is capping very slowly, we're holding enough capture power that it's going to take him some time. Over here as well, more Iron Fist Bulls charging into the Spawn of Tzeentch, punching through that barrier relatively quickly, but then the Spawn turn around and start to tentacle back. But oh man, look at that combo attack, double combo attack there from those Ogres. That was pretty impressive. A little bit of Searing Doom. Searing Doom actually does pretty good damage to monstrous infantry from the Herald here. He's also going to come in and drop his own rear charge, so nice monstrous infantry battle. This is pretty much it right now, too. I'm far enough ahead that as long as I can hold this objective number 1, then we should be able to win. And I'm also still threatening objective number 2, so it's not like he can commit fully all of his forces to try and push me off that one objective. And not to mention, I think, yeah, I am technically still holding this. He hasn't been able to fully capture it yet. More saber tusks rushing in. Looks like the pink horrors are probably just about gone. Once they're gone, he will capture it pretty quickly. The screamers aren't going to help at all with that, but at the very least, they can continue to kill units, rout them off. You can see the Mournfangs actually routing there. So pretty good stuff for me. Tzeentch definitely feels very strong. Some people have been saying the barrier isn't that strong. I definitely think that barrier needs some kind of nerf. I'm not really sure exactly what yet, but it is a ridiculous mechanic in terms of giving you essentially infinite free healing. Theoretically infinite free healing, right? Herald forcing a blob here. Spawn getting a little bit of a rear charge, but a couple of them immediately go down to those saber tusks. Yeah, more Noblar Trappers could potentially come up here, but the Forsaken just kind of rush past objective number 2 just to occupy them. Again, occupy their attention, distract them, not allow them to actually get up and capture the objective that they need to, because number 1 is dangerously close to falling. Number 3 is actually still in my control, also dangerously close to falling, but the Screamer Blob is very strong. My name on Steam is currently Screamer Face, because the face of the Screamer speaks to me. I know they're moving around quite a bit, so it's probably kind of hard to tell, but anyway, there's a victory. So I felt pretty comfortable that whole time, even though my opponent was kind of all up in my grill with his lord, especially with his characters, and just reinforcing with more units to try and keep me bottled up there. It felt like I was still able to fight effectively enough. Again, trade even and still get units out onto the objectives to capture them. So it ended up working out pretty well for me. Honestly, probably trading better than even, considering that even with the comeback mechanic in the late game, he was still like just barely starting to pull ahead. Anyway, in terms of army damage value, the Herald's super cost effective. I think it costs like 1,500 or something. Very low with this particular kit. Very, very cost effective. The Soul Grinder didn't get quite pay for itself. Neither did the Doom Knights, but, you know, tactically they're nice to have. Forsaken of Tzeentch, considering I only summoned these guys once, 1,469 value. And look at this, the Humble Blue Horrors. I think I did summon these guys twice maybe, but still 1,546 damage value. I mean, against the light armor of a lot of Ogre units, the shooting of Tzeentch is pretty nasty, which is why I think these are probably your 2 S-tier factions right now, in my opinion, but Tzeentch does get a little bit of an edge in a head-to-head because of that. Flamers also do some really nice damage, both pay for themselves. Spawn, the damage is nice, but the capture weight for me in particular in this battle was more important, and they were very good at that. Pink Horrors also coming in, doing some good damage, and the Screamers, again, super good in this matchup if they're used correctly, although I did summon both of these guys twice. They still paid for themselves twice, so that's nice. These guys were on their way to paying for themselves, and again, another relatively cost-effective blue horror. The Tyrant I do like quite a bit. I'd have to look at his kit, but I want to say he's pretty cheap as well, considering the amount of damage that he got out of him, supported by the Butcher there. Pretty impressed by the Mournfang Cavalry as well. I haven't seen them do well in a lot of situations, and initially I think they did pretty poorly, but the second time they were brought out, it looks like they probably did some pretty good damage. I don't know. The Ogre Cavalry, it's still not that great in my opinion, but these Saber Tusks at only 500 points, very cost-effective. They are kind of like your discount Fleshhounds, right? Gorgers, this is maybe the only replay, actually, where I haven't seen Gorgers pay for themselves. I do think you want to take Scrag, even in Reserve, so that you can get your Gorger buffs going, even in the late game. But definitely Gorgers, still very good, but relatively weak against Tzeentch shooting. The missile block chance of the Iron Fist helped a little bit, but still, most of them don't pay for themselves. Trappers, on the other hand, I'm a huge fan of in this matchup. I think probably you just take 5, honestly, in most situations. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you do like watching this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you once again. We'll see you next time.